Great, we're live. So thanks to our online viewers for joining us this evening for tonight's conversation with Borinquen Gallo, who is an Italian, Puerto Rican, Bronx-based multidisciplinary artist and educator. This talk is part of the Siena Art Institute's project Fragile in Art with support of our region of Tuscany through the Giovani Sì initiative Toscana in Contemporanea, which is an initiative that's centered on the theme of conflict, internal and external conflict between generations, social, political, historic, linguistic conflicts, and much more. And we're exploring how both emerging and established artists, Italian and international artists, can address this theme of conflict and how art can be a channel for resolution and recomposition. And today's guest speaker, Borinquen Gallo, creates artwork which delves into themes of transformation, community development, social, cultural systems and structures through sculpture and installations that are made using a range of repurposed materials. So it's absolutely wonderful to have this chance to speak with you this evening. Just as we're waiting for our online viewers to join us, I'll briefly just share an overview just to let people know a bit about your background, since your work utilizes also many different materials such as packing materials, trash bags, nets, and debris, which becomes painstakingly manually knitted and threaded into these lush textural weavings, which are just absolutely enchanting to see. It's also really interesting to think about the considerations that emerge from this in terms of the material, formal, the psychologically intimate and social aspects, and how that works to modulate the sort of the familiar and the surprising to really disrupt viewers' assumptions regarding what's valuable and what's discardable. And yeah, in terms of for their backgrounds, Borinquen Gallo received her BFA in painting and sculpture from the Cooper Union for the Advancement of Science and Art and earned her MFA in painting from Hunter College in New York. She's received numerous awards, including the Sol Shaviro Award, the Marion Netter Fellowship, and the Doris Leibowitz Art Educator Award, as well as residencies, including the Children's Museum of Manhattan, the Bronx Museum of the Arts AIM program, the Vermont Studio Center, and the Cooper Union Artist Residency. She's exhibited at the Burning and Water Gallery, the Brick Arts Media, Smack Mellon, the Bronx Museum of the Arts, Wave Hill Sunroom Project Space, the Queens Museum, and many, many more. She is currently working on curatorial projects with, well, she has worked on curatorial projects with the BAM Fisher and Pratt Institute and is currently represented by Mallon Gallery and is also an adjunct associate professor of art and design education at the Pratt Institute of New York. So without further ado, let me turn the stage over to Borinquen Gallo. It's so nice to have you here this evening.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and I'm delighted to be here. I can't wait to share my work. This has been an occasion to connect with an institution outside of the United States, so it's always welcomed. And I am delighted to be here sharing my work. Lisa already spoke a little bit about what my work entails. To give you a little extra background, I was born in Italy. My mom is Puerto Rican, my father is Italian. I moved to the Bronx when I was a young 13-year-old. And that was an interesting experience for me and a fountain of inspiration, and where I actually kind of started to delve into a process of both personal and transformation in terms of my own self, and also then being inspired by the materials that surrounded me. So many of which were, at the time where I moved in 1988, the Bronx was derelict. It was a lot of burned buildings, and just kind of like the images were a little bit disturbing. And I was coming from living in Baroque Rome, and I moved to an area that of the Bronx that was sort of seriously affected by many social problems. So at the beginning, I had a moment of cultural shock. And then after that, I started to discover the treasure that in fact the Bronx is, and it started to inspire my work as I also began my journey as initially an art student and then an artist in my own right. So I began to be inspired by the trash, the plastic bags, the debris netting, as Lisa was experiencing and expressing earlier, the caution tape, and using all of these to kind of recreate and transform and look to extrapolate beauty there where no one expects to find it. So these materials are woven, braided, twisted, knitted into these textural exhibition, sculptures and installations. So this is a series that I began with a series of found hubcaps. Those of you who have experienced or haven't ever been in the Bronx, so know that everyone on Saturdays dedicates their Saturdays, especially the men, to catering their cars. And then these hubcaps are often thrown away or found on the periphery of the highways. And so I am doing an ongoing series of collecting them and transforming them into like a Baroque version of themselves, where they go from trash to this ornate architectural decorative elements that are more reminiscent of maybe Baroque ceilings with coffers, inspired also by my background in Rome. This is another installation and another made out of recycled caution tape and red plastic bags, all recycled. This is called Poppy Field. And, a lot of these become metaphors pointing to and cautioning us against the lure of consumerism. This installation was called Bee Sanctuary. And I weave mostly in my studio by myself, sometimes collaboratively. So for this particular exhibition, I had to weave an entire room out of caution tape through the debris netting. It was an important project for me because it invited collaborators, and the collaborators started kind of coming from everywhere, kind of spontaneously asking if they could participate. And it started from my very closest community, the community of my family, extended community of the parish. So here in this picture, we see basically college students high school students, my aunt in the center with the red sweater from Puerto Rico that came to help me, and my friend Elba here. And we're all knitting together. So as we knitted together, the whole sculpture took on like another dimension of social kind of interaction, where a group of women got together and the dialogue that was emerging became almost the most important part, us connecting, dialoguing together. It became kind of like a social fabric, this textural weaving. And the metaphor of the beehive emerged as all of us, just like bees, were sort of collaborating and working together and to create the exhibition and the installation. The installation lined the walls of the Sunroof project space in a cultural space called Wayfield in the northern section of the Bronx. And it became a metaphor. Bee Sanctuary with 2 E's stands for more an invitation to be sanctuary to nature, obviously, to the bees, but also to our environment. And nonetheless, also, as you know, the caution tape is what the police, the NYPD here in New York City, uses to delineate crime scenes, and also to sometimes the construction areas. So this title, Bee Sanctuary, points both to the need of preserving the environment, as well as is an invitation to the NYPD to preserve Black lives in light of the recent events and the ongoing systemic police brutality that we have experienced in this country for centuries. So this is, again, some of the details of that installation, which also included live plants involucred into these cocoon-like structures that were dangling from the ceiling. This is another view of the installation in different gallery spaces. And this is another that we created, again, collaboratively with a group of girls and women from the Bronx. And it's called Green Unplugged. And this also was sort of a metaphor pointing to the need of preserving nation and highlighting the importance of climate change and, the way that we are disconnected from nature, and that our world is turning into plastic and pollution. So all of these pieces are, while they're metaphors, they also involve the social interaction in their making. These are slides of exhibitions then that were subsequent to that. And these are some of the collaborative community projects that I've been involved in and that stemmed out of my practice. So although my practice was in the studio many times, as you saw, it kind of merged and consolidated itself with my education practice in many instances. So in this instance, for example, we went into a community housing for seniors in the Bronx, and I was invited to develop a series of workshops where we would work along with the community, do intergenerational workshops with the seniors and local families, as well as my own family that I invited. And to kind of, one of the things I find helpful in dealing with communities is really kind of identifying with them and come together in a very familiar level. So bringing families together and also bringing different generations, young children, as well as couples and families, teenagers with the seniors. As we know, in the United States, we have this issue and kind of an obsession with race and groups and separating and labeling everyone. So I thought it important that when we talk about community, and especially marginalized communities, that we find ways to bridge this isolation and bring them together. So particularly for the seniors who were very isolated in this housing project, we came in and we invited them to participate in a collaborative installation of in cardboard, where we reimagined a utopian Bronx. So they were invited to kind of select a building of their choice and then redesign it in cardboard, make a model to create what their utopian version of the building would be. And then all of the cardboard models were assembled into an installation of a utopian Bronx. This is another project that we did in Fort Greene. That is a section of Brooklyn where there was a series of brownstone, very expensive homes that had a garden. And the garden was actually a community garden, but many of the people living in the neighborhood thought it was private to one of these wealthy homes. So it was underutilized. So the Museum of Art of the African Diaspora invited me to do an intervention in this garden with the community and to activate it somehow through a participatory workshop. So through this workshop, we invited and activated the garden by sort of engaging in a participatory sculpture made out, again, of recycled plastic bags. We turned the garden into a sort of a playground, and we were replanting the dead plants together. And this is how we were able to basically reactivate it. And as soon as people saw activity in the garden, we saw how both the residency of the wealthy brownstones and the people across the street from the housing projects, which are, lower income housing projects where the housing is dedicated to people of lower income, came together and played together in the same space. Their children started to interact. Their parents started to weave together and plan together. So this project was interesting in seeing how the activation and the art practice managed to bridge the gap between these two coexisting communities that were living in the same space but were otherwise separated. So then again, with the Bronx Museum of the Arts, we did another exhibition / project with a street event. And this is kind of like more of a street performance that we did in connection with an event that they do on the streets, sponsored by, again, the Bronx Museum, Indeed, and also this project geared at working with dreamers. As you know, dreamers and DACA immigrants are young people and children who are in the United States because they were brought here, mostly against their will or under circumstances they couldn't control. And they are always facing the threat of deportation. So in this, this installation is called the Tree of Lucid Dreamers. And passers-by and participants were invited of writing their dreams on leaves and attaching them to this kind of fictional tree that we made, a tree where participants could express their desires for themselves and exert some control. A lucid dream is a state of dreaming where you're semi-awake. So you're still able to have an element of control over your dreams. So this became a metaphor for kind of like the precarious status of dreamers in the United States, and their struggles to kind of like maintain citizenship, obtain citizenship, that is, and legal status in the country. So it was touching to see how many of them participated and how many of them kind of wrote their intentions, almost like prayers on this tree. And then the writing and the participation kind of extended beyond dreamers, and as many people became interested in also participating and adding to this live installation that basically, as the event unfolded, took body. This is another project that we did in collaboration with the Bronx Museum and Dreamers, where we selected a cultural anchor in the Bronx, in this case, a hair salon. And the owner of the hair salon, along with a group of dreamers that were hired by the Bronx Museum and paid to participate in this workshop, they would come, have an income, and then I facilitated their ideas, and they came up with their own ideas in terms of what they wanted to do, and we together came up with this. Co-created this installation made out of hair, fake hair, which is a great kind of thing in the Bronx. In a lot of these hair salons, people use fake hair to design hairstyles with extensions, and it became a metaphor for status in many tribal cultures. The more intricate your hair do is, and it kind of like points to your role in the community and your status. So this became a metaphor for like kind of like the status of DACA and dreamers, and again, their precarious situation. And the event and installation culminated into a public event open to the public, where each of the dreamer were performing and kind of telling of their stories and of struggle and overcoming in front of an audience, and again, further heightening awareness to this incredibly touching and critical social issue that we face here with our immigration youth. These are the participants in the salon at the final shot here, and this is the outdoor community event that we did in collaboration with the Bronx Museum. The cultural anchor, Angela Santana, was the owner of the Bronx Salon, and the community members that attended. So that was really touching right there. Then I wanted to share also a project that I'm currently working on. So it's still, I want to stress this, it's still in its proposal stage. And it's a public art project that I've been invited to do in the Bronx. And for the new 40th precinct station house that is currently being built in the Bronx. And in this project, I've been invited to reflect and think about how public art can help re-envision community police relations, which, as speaking about conflict, I cannot think of a more acute conflict than that. As you know, currently we're still suffering through, and the past 2 years we went almost through a civil war here in New York and many cities of the United States due to, very, very aggravated events and high-profile murders of, Black men. And so this is perhaps the most challenging project I have ever done. I am still in the phase of, finishing it, and it's still in its proposal phase. But this is the model of the new precinct where I'm being asked to make an intervention. It is located in the Melrose section of the Bronx, between Melrose and Mott Haven. And it's going to be in a huge building, and it's going to be surrounded by schools, and on the other side, a juvenile detention center. So it's almost ironic that it became kind of like almost a metaphor for the pipeline, almost as if it's a very challenging also because of that. So I was assigned to make an intervention along the perimeter of the parking lot. And in order to set out to get ideas for this project, I thought I would start from the community. I went out and started interviewing community members, all of which kindly, and as well as police officers. and basically asking them if they were to imagine what the ideal police-community relationships would be, what would that look like? So I recorded their interviews and their responses. And what I was really surprised to see is once I tallied the words that emerged from these interviews was that a lot of the words that they used actually coincided. The police officers were saying, well, we would like more communication with the community. We would like transparency, security, civility, friendliness. And the community itself, in turn, also was expressing similar ambitions, that we would like the police to be civil to us. We would like to feel secure and not threatened by them. We would like them to be courteous, understanding. We would like better communication, protection. So communication, security, civility, these were words that I saw coming from both parties. So this pointed to identification. To me, this kind of became kind of a metaphor for what was going to guide this project. This shared ideal led me to consider that the only way to re-envision police-community relations would be for us to create opportunities for meaningful interaction through a shared space and shared programming. So in order to create this kind of identification with each other, the lack of identification with each other, if I cannot identify with you, lays at the foundation of the conflict. So in order to resolve the conflict, we need to be able, from one polarized party, to be able to identify with the other polarized party. So the assignment for me was to make an intervention to the fence of the parking lot. And so formally, the artwork will be a sculptural installation along the perimeter of the 40th Precinct Station House. It will be created from stainless steel, emerging from the fence as a series of abstract organic forms woven together, weaving obviously being what's the recurrent theme in all my work. Conceptually, the artwork is a metaphor for unity. I know that sounds really utopian, suggesting the possibility of the police precinct fence as an interface for police-community relations instead of a barrier. So the reflective portions will allow both police and community members to walk by and see themselves in the other. And socially, the artwork is meant to soften the perimeter and attract surrounding community to the new 40th Precinct Station House. So this is the image of what I'm envisioning, kind of morphing the fence into a reflective stainless steel body that may invite engagement, both spontaneous engagement as people are passing by, instead of like walking as fast as possible to pass the precinct, to feel like they're being welcomed. They can sit, they can be nested, they can be basically housed and welcomed and nurtured by this, instead of perceiving it as a barrier. Also, the reflective portions will reflect the environment, hence creating the illusion that the fence disappears. So it's no longer a fence or a barrier or a prison, but it is kind of reflecting the environment and community around it. So the idea is that when you look into the reflection, you, the officer, may be able to see, instead of your face, the community member's face, and vice versa. The community member looking into the fence may see himself or herself reflected into the officer. So here's my kind of sketch, and then obviously the metaphor of weaving, pointing to unity, because in weaving we have two opposite parties, the warp and the weft, coming together to create a fabric or a texture. So in that sense here, my metaphor is quite literal, thinking of the two opposing parties coming together to form one social fabric. So this is my handmade model where I'm trying to weave a material that's solid rather than soft, like I usually do. This is the location, and the intervention hopes to live here around the perimeter of the fence. This is an aerial view. It should be pointed that the precinct is the first historically precinct to have a green roof, and also to have a dedicated community room where we hope to have supporting programming for the community. Again, none of this, everything remains in the metaphorical realm until community and police engage in social interaction that's meaningful through programming. So these are some more images of the installation. that again is in its proposal phase, so it may not happen exactly like this, but this is what we are working on continuing to do. Meanwhile, I've also reached out to different educational institutions in the Bronx, including schools and others, to be able to try to kind of bring communities together as we develop a curriculum and programming around this project that bring the surrounding parties together and in a structured way. This is the front of the precinct with the dedicated community room I was mentioning earlier, where we hope to be able to develop some programs. And this is the kind of outcome that I hope to achieve, and that in terms of the community being involved and being involved in the process and the use of this structure. So in terms of fostering community, what I try to keep in mind as I think of conflict revolution and resolution is really that conflict resolution is a revolution. And it starts, although many people think of it as something outwards, I think it's actually starts inwardly. Reflecting and kind of reconciling with your own conflicts often leads with the ability to be able to resolve the social ones as well. So I always say kind of like we start from micro to macro. I start local. I started with my very family, with myself, trying to kind of transform myself from, and then also trying to kind of invite others in kind of a first personal and then social conversion, that it's required to be able to reconcile with enemies, to reconcile with your own enemies, and then to reconcile with the social, the social conflicts that may surround us at some level. So I start local. And then things grow from there. Your community starts here. So whenever you are in a school, in an institution, or not in an institution, to try to kind of reach out and start and foster community, build relationships, don't burn bridges. And if your work engages with community, be ethical. This is also what I try to tell my students when we talk and reflect about community engagement, social practice. Be present. I find that presence and community are kind of like the best way to ensure community gets developed is you have to be there. You have to be there, you have to engage, you have to get to know people and identify with them, connect, empathize. And if you can co-design and co-create, even better. So these are kind of like how I would like to close this with a great thank you for my audience and for listening, and I ask for your support also and welcome your questions about this or other projects that you may have. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. This has been very inspiring, and just it's wonderful to have this insight into your background as well as your current works in progress. It's very inspiring and really aligns a lot with the initiatives that we are pursuing here at the Siena Art Institute with our regional initiatives addressing conflict resolution, the idea of trying to build bridges to marginalized communities, utilizing creative practice. So it's really wonderful to see what you have worked on previously and some of the projects that you're currently developing. Also to hear about your I just so much appreciated your bullet points of fostering community, because I think that's the idea of creating projects that address conflict resolution. But of course, when working collaboratively, conflicts can arise within a collaborative group. So I think those bullet points are so useful as a way to keep people focused on the shared goals. And it would be interesting to hear a bit more about this idea of how you work with your students in the field of art education through social practice, wishing to be making sure to be ethical when engaging with communities. I know it's a very broad topic, but could you say just a bit more about that, because it seems quite relevant?
Yeah, it's actually been something interesting for me too. As I've been teaching, I noticed that many times art departments, sometimes tend to work in silos, oh, this is the fine arts and this is the education. And I think as an educator, it became clear to me that working collaboratively and being social and using, not using, but kind of like utilizing the platform of the institution to be able to reach communities outside of the institution becomes kind of a mission and a pedagogical social aggrandization, in a sense, of the potential of teaching. So making it more relevant, making it more meaningful. So many times in my courses, I try to partner with a group or an institution or a community so that we can get the students out of the campus and into the community to work together. So just recently, yesterday, for example, we did a collaborative installation in the Lower East Side in tandem with an exhibition that was about the elections. There was a midterm election last Tuesday. And so students, we co-created a massive installation made out of recycled plastic and reclaimed plastic to highlight, again, the need to vote in favor of climate change regulations and all of that. So for the student, like, to be able to be involved, co-create, and also do it in connection with a social issue makes their work more kind of meaningful, and also makes them understand how art can play a role. It's not just a metaphor, but can play a role in highlighting awareness to social issues and also make a difference in that sense. Yes.
Oh, it's really fascinating and really very important. I really appreciate the way that you tie together the meaning of sort of utopian theoretical ideas that can be a meaningful inspiration, but that it also needs to be tied to meaningful social interaction to keep it from just remaining at a purely theoretical level.
Yes.
And I think your art just provides some beautiful examples of how to actually put that into practice. And yeah, I suppose the idea of or also with your the dreamers work, the idea of lucid dreaming, but also this notion of utopia that sometimes people may shy away from. Well, we don't want to be too utopian, but perhaps you're arguing there is a role for fostering utopian ideas, but then seeing how to apply that to our actual realities.
Thank you for saying that. Yes, I think that many times we sort of over focus on the problem and articulating it and protesting, which is obviously needed. But then we need to go past that into how do we create dialogue, solution, restorative, conflict resolution, so that these horrible problems we have can begin to kind of walk towards, yes, I am going to remain an optimist. We need to, it's hard work, working at obtaining the utopia, but in that sense, I'm a dreamer too. and someone needs to indulge in the dialogue of, even with the people you consider not aligned with your ideology, to be able to get there.
I think that's really such a critical role that artists can play within a social context to try and foster that idea of dreaming and utopian visions that can be connected to our communities and also reaching out to other communities as well. So it's really fantastic to see these examples that you shared with us this evening. We probably should be wrapping up just in the interest of time, but I could go on for hours talking with you. It's just been so inspiring. And I think also for our community here in Siena, we really appreciate the chance to hear about your work, since it ties in so much to different initiatives that we have underway here. So
thank you so much.
And I'll certainly, we'll be sure to share links also on our blog and website, so if people are interested to follow up and learn more about your work, they can also find some links there as well. So I'll just mention to our online viewers, as we are continuing this series of community conversations, next Tuesday's appointment will be in Italian with our musicologist Guido Burki. And then on November 29th, we'll have another English language presentation with the Siena Art Institute's resident, Harrison Rivers, who will be speaking about his work as a playwright. So hope our viewers can come back to join us for that as well. But in the meantime, it's been such an honor to have you here as our speaker this evening. And again, thank you so much for this chance to share your work with our community here at the Siena Art Institute.
Thank you so much to you. You've been amazing. Thank you.